The president at the National Prayer Breakfast talking impeachment and going after Democrats.
He knows my family, our great country, and your president have been put through a terrible ordeal by some very dishonest and corrupt people. They have done everything possible to destroy us, and by so doing, very badly hurt our nation. They know what they are doing is wrong, but they put themselves far ahead of our great country. Weeks ago and again yesterday, courageous Republican politicians and leaders had the wisdom, fortitude, and strength to do what everyone knows was right. I don't like people who use their faith as justification for doing what they know is wrong. Nor do I like people who say, "I pray for you," when they know that that's not so.
He's talking about Speaker Pelosi. What's your reaction to that?
My instant reaction is that this sounds like the preface for a vindictive moment in this presidency. I mean, my instinct reaction, I was whispering to you when we were listening to that, it reminded me a little bit of Erdogan after the failed coup. I don't want to go that far, but there was that tone of nastiness, and get ready for that. That was a frightening moment of television right there.
Carol, part of the president's core base are white evangelicals who are willing to look past countless indiscretions on the part of our president because of policies that are in line with their faith. How could he possibly make this argument?
I think it's particularly chilling to hear him say that about Mitt Romney, who I think everybody in the country probably looks at, whether they agree with him or not, and knows that he genuinely was choosing a faith option. It couldn't have been more genuine what he said. So it's funny to hear the president, not funny, to hear the president say that he's using it to justify it. As for evangelicals, look at all of the things they've looked past. The Access Hollywood moment, when the president is on, a candidate is on live tape talking about grabbing women because he can, because he's famous, grabbing them by the genitals. The times that he paid hush money and lied about it, about extramarital affairs. The way he's actually made fun of different religious faiths, it is striking. Really striking.
And we shouldn't also let the president reframe this historic moment we've been through. Those Republicans decided not to remove him from office, to acquit him. That did not mean they were blessing what he did or saying that what he did was proper. In fact, a number of the Republican senators issued statements saying what the president did with Ukraine was wrong. His conduct was improper and inappropriate. So he seems to be revising that narrative in his own remarks. But we should remember what the Republican senators actually said.
But aren't those senators allowing him to do that if they don't speak up now?
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I mean, I agree with you partially. Some of them said what he did was wrong, but for too many, they agreed with the view that the phone call was perfect. It's not an acquittal. They see it as a vindication.
Yeah. Lonnie, your reaction?
Well, you know, it's for Senator Romney, the decision he made was clearly motivated by what he believed to be right, and that was a strong faith component to that. Others will surely question it. Those who support the president will question it. But I think for Senator Romney, the only thing that matters is that he was secure in his own decision, and that's all that matters to him.
All right. Thank you all.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.